But the longer it goes on, the more expensive it's going to be to settle, because any settlement involves paying President Trump's costs as well as the BBC's own costs.
The BBC has vowed to fight the $10 billion defamation lawsuit brought by Donald Trump over the editing of his speech in a Panorama documentary. Media law experts have told The Times that the corporation could be fairly confident of winning a court battle against the US president, but because of its financial weakness, the BBC may still be forced into an out-of-court settlement in order to avoid the huge legal cost of defending the claim. I'm joined now by the solicitor and legal commentator Joshua Rozenberg. Joshua, good morning.
Good morning, Hugo.
Thanks very much for being with us. Look, do you agree with that assessment that Donald Trump would have a hard time winning his case against the BBC in court?
Not quite. I don't think the BBC would be forced into a settlement. It may well be in the BBC's interest to have a settlement. Certainly, it will be difficult for President Trump to prove his case, but if the BBC chooses to fight it, the question is, at what cost to the BBC? Don't forget, the BBC has admitted that it got this wrong, so it would be fighting this on the basis that the programme wasn't seen by anybody, or not by very many people in Florida, which is where President Trump is suing, and so these would be simply technical grounds which the President is going to argue about. Whether that's really something the BBC should be spending licence payers' money on is really something the BBC will have to decide.
What about the harm issue? A lot of people have said that it's hard for Donald Trump to claim that this caused him any harm in Florida, given he so overwhelmingly won Florida not long afterwards. Is there any grounds for defence there?
Well, he puts it rather differently. He says it's very damaging to his brand. He says that the value of his personal brand alone is reasonably estimated to be worth tens of billions of dollars, and business ventures bearing his name generate hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue. And then there's the injury to his business and personal reputation. That's the sort of thing you put in a legal claim. But he takes the view that this caused much greater damage. The fact that the BBC says, well, he won in Florida afterwards, isn't contradicted. The fact that the BBC says this is one thing, but he contradicts it by saying, look at the damage, direct harm to his professional and occupational interests, value of his property, diminishing and tarnishing his reputation as politician leader in the eyes of the American public and the world. He puts it rather differently.
So if the BBC did decide then to go all the way, and there was no move to settle at all, what kind of court costs are we talking about here?
Millions of dollars, because you've got a jury trial. If President Trump is successful, that's what he's asked for, a jury will come up with a figure which the BBC may well decide is too great, assuming that the jury finds in President Trump's favour, which is something he's clearly expecting, certainly in Florida. It would then go to an appeal court, which might reduce the value of the claim, assuming, again, that the jury has found in his favour, so the amount that the BBC would pay might be less, might be nothing at all. But all the way along the line, the BBC is racking up costs paying its own American lawyers.
But I mean, even if it won, in this kind of court case, are we still talking costs in the millions, in the tens of millions, even in the hundreds of millions?
Certainly in the millions. I can't really say what US lawyers would charge. But it would be expensive. It depends how many hearings there are, how many proceedings there are. And that's something that the BBC's lawyers have now got to consider. They obviously had an opportunity to talk to President Trump's lawyers before the legal proceedings were issued earlier this week. And we don't know whether they tried it, or whether they were unsuccessful, or whether they're fighting this as a matter of principle. All they're saying is that they're fighting on. But the longer it goes on, the more expensive it's going to be to settle, because any settlement involves paying President Trump's costs as well as the BBC's own costs.
You said that Trump must feel that he could win in Florida. Might it not be worth his while to do this even if he doesn't feel he could win, because he just thinks the BBC will settle?
Yes, lots of people sue in the expectation that it'll settle, and some people call their bluff, and some people fight it out. And sometimes that's successful and the claimant loses, and sometimes both sides lose because they've spent vast amounts of money and nothing very much comes out of it. So, litigation is something that President Trump is very used to. So, to be fair, is the BBC, but he's on his home ground, isn't he? In this, he knows what he's doing. He thinks he has a chance, and if he doesn't have a chance, he thinks he'll get some sort of settlement and a further apology from the BBC. So it's a question of really reading his mind and deciding whether it's worth fighting this, given, as I say, that the BBC has admitted that it got it wrong.
I mean, if the BBC does settle, what kind of cost are we talking about there? Probably, and also, can it settle without admitting that he was right?
You're right to say that any settlement would be an admission that he was entitled to bring a claim against the BBC. But on the other hand, as I say, the BBC has already apologised and withdrawn the Panorama programme. So it wouldn't be going much further to say, well, we thought it was sufficient to apologise, but if you want some money, payment to yourself or payment to a charity of your choice, to mark the fact that we shouldn't have broadcast this programme, we're prepared to pay some money. The question is how much. That's a matter for negotiations. It's very difficult for the BBC with public funds to spend that on settling a case. Clearly, there are many people who say the BBC should fight it as a matter of principle, and the BBC might well win because this is all bluff by President Trump. How can he show that he's actually been caused any damage? Is he going to come up with people in Florida who say, well, I saw this and I've changed my mind about the president as a result of watching this programme? Well, I'm sure he could find people who would say that, but quite how many and what impact they would have on a jury, that's all to be decided. So that's all one possibility. On the other hand, there are people who pay their television licenses in the UK, like you and me, who wouldn't want the BBC to spend any more on this case than they need to, and certainly wouldn't want money which is paid by you and me to make programmes being spent on lawyers.
Joshua Rozenberg, thank you very much indeed. Joshua is a solicitor and a legal commentator. Great to speak to you.
There was some killing going on that shouldn't have happened, and we appreciate them working. In a little while, you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words, talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So we have to get them on the same page, but I think that's working along. Very good talk.